Ever written a giant formula only to break it changing just one value? With the let function, we can avoid these headaches and improve the calc efficiency of our formulas. Let enables you to assign names to values, cells, or intermediate calculations inside your formula, much like defining variables when programming. But don't worry, it's super easy to use. It simply means you can write formulas that are cleaner, easier to read, and debug. And when you're repeating the same calculations, it'll improve performance. Let is available for Microsoft 365, Excel Online, and Excel 2021 onwards. If you're using Excel 2019 or older, you won't see it. Here I'm calculating the sales commission for these salespeople. You can see the formula in column D checks if the sales are greater than 10,000. If they are, it multiplies the sales value by 0.1 plus 0.02, which is 12% commission. Otherwise, they get 10% commission. Now, there's nothing wrong with this formula, but with let, we can document or define the variables, which will make it clear how the formula is calculating and easier to debug or hand over to other users. Let's take a look. First, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Shift-U to expand the formula bar, and I'm going to write it up here. Equals let, and I'm going to Alt-Enter to give myself space and move down onto the second row in the formula bar. The first variable is the sales value, so we're going to call it sales. And it's in this cell here, C5. So that's my first variable name and value, comma, Alt-Enter. The next variable is the limit, and that's $10,000. That's my next name and value pair, Alt-Enter. The base rate is 0.1 or 10%, comma, Alt-Enter. And the bonus rate is 0.02 or 2%. And they get that if their sales are over 10,000, comma, Alt-Enter. Now the last argument in let is always the calculation. So all I need to do now is write the if formula, and I can use the names that I've defined above. So if my sales, and notice it pops up in the IntelliSense tab, are greater than the limit, then I'm going to take the sales multiplied by the sum of the base rate, arrow down to select it, tab, plus the bonus rate. There it is there, tab, close parentheses on that formula. Otherwise they just get sales times the base rate. Close parentheses on if. I'm going to Alt-Enter and put my closing parentheses on let on the next row. Press Enter. Let's copy it down. And you can see I get the same results. But when I come back to this formula next month, or if I need to hand it over to someone, it'll be quick and easy for them to pick it up. Before we move on to a more advanced example, I want to point out the syntax for let. It's simply a series of name and value pairs separated by commas. These are our variables, and they can be cell references, constants, or even formulas. The last argument is the final calculation or formula. So there will always be an odd number of arguments in your let formulas. Let is also great for streamlining and eliminating duplicate calculations in formulas, resulting in improved performance. And if formulas are one of the most common places we see duplication of calculations. Taking this formula that calculates the profit margin as an example, you can see the margin calculation itself is listed 5 times, and it will be calculated up to 4 separate times depending on the profit margin returned. With let, we can reduce this calculation down to once, which will not only make the formula shorter and easier to interpret, but also way more efficient for Excel to calculate. Before I rewrite this formula using let, let's just step through how it's working. So it calculates the margin, and it checks whether it's greater than 40%. If it is, it concatenates the text high and an opening parentheses, and then it takes the margin again and uses the text function to format it as a percentage with 1 decimal place, and then ends with another closing parentheses. If the margin's not greater than 40%, it recalculates the margin and checks if it's greater than 25%. If it is, it says it's medium and concatenates the percentage calculation along with opening and closing parentheses. Otherwise, it assumes it must be low and again converts the margin into text in a percentage format and wraps it in parentheses. And that's what we see in this column here. So let's see how we can write this with let more succinctly and more efficiently. I'll rewrite it in the formula bar using let. Alt-Enter for a new row. So first we define the variables. The first one is cost, and that's my cost of goods sold column, or COGS for short, comma, Alt-Enter. Revenue is my sales column, comma, Alt-Enter. And then I want the margin, which is revenue minus cost, close parentheses, divided by revenue, comma. Next I want to build a label that contains whether the margin is low, medium or high, and the percentage. So we'll name this label, and it's simply an if formula. If margin is greater than 0.4, then it's high. Close double quotes. And this needs to be a nested if, so the next if is margin is greater than 0.25. It's going to be medium, otherwise it must be low. Close parentheses on both ifs, comma. So that's my label. And then the final calculation, we're going to Alt-Enter to go onto a new row, is going to take the label and concatenate it with an opening parentheses, and we'll use the text function to take the margin and we'll format it as a percentage with 1 decimal place. Close parentheses on text, and then we're going to join that to a closing parenthesis. So that's my calculation. I'm going to Alt-Enter and close let. Press Enter, and you can see we get the same results. Now we not only have a formula that's much easier to read, it's also much more efficient for Excel to calculate, because margin is only being calculated once, and that's here at this step. If you have slow spreadsheets with lots of formulas, consider whether implementing let could improve efficiency. Now you might be thinking, wait, isn't this just like named ranges? Kind of. Named ranges live in the name manager and can be used across your entire workbook, which is great if you have variables you want to use in formulas in multiple sheets, because you can update them in one place and then that change feeds through to your whole workbook. Let, on the other hand, is local. It only exists inside the formula. And yes, you can absolutely use both together. One of the limitations of let is the inability to evaluate variables inside the formula, which can make debugging difficult, but I've got a trick for that coming up. For example, if I want to see the value in the cost of goods cell, I can simply select it and I get the tooltip that shows me what it evaluates to. Alternatively, in earlier versions of Excel, I can press the F9 key and it gives me the evaluation in the formula bar itself and Control Z to undo. However, if you want to evaluate the margin calculation, which refers to variables named above, I can't do that inside let in the same way. As you can see, I get the name error. But there's another way to evaluate your variables using let, and that is to simply give the final calculation a name. I'll call it calc, comma, and then after the calculation, another comma, Alt-Enter, and for the calculation, I can specify any of my variables. So if I want to see margin, I specify it, press Enter, and now I just get the margin returned. This also illustrates the fact that you don't need to use every variable you declare inside your let formulas. In this instance, we didn't use the label or calc steps. Once you're happy with it, you can edit the formula and go back and replace margin with calc, or you could just get rid of this name and revert to how the formula was before. If you enjoy learning how to break formulas down like this and want to go deeper into advanced techniques, I've got a full course where we cover these kinds of formulas step by step. It's called Advanced Excel Formulas, and it's packed with practical examples like you've seen here. You'll find the link below in the description and pinned comment. Okay, let's talk about when not to use let. If you're only using a variable once, and the formula is quite short, let doesn't give you much advantage. You're just adding complexity for no real gain. Also, if you're building a report where you've already split the logic across separate columns, that's often clearer, especially when others need to pick up and audit your work. Let shines in long, complex formulas and where you reuse logic multiple times. Once you get comfortable breaking logic into parts with let, you'll start spotting opportunities to simplify and streamline your formulas. And when you're ready to take it a step further and turn those formulas into your own custom functions, Lambda is the next tool to learn. It works hand in hand with let to make your formulas not just simpler, but reusable. Check out my Lambda tutorial next to see how powerful the combination can be. I'll see you there.